Hello, third graders. Happy Friday. We're going to do lesson 9 of The Wind in the Willows, and it's called Toad's Adventures. So with this title, what does it make you think is going to happen to Toad? When we left him in the last story, he was in prison for 20 years. Do you think he's actually going to stay in prison for 20 years? Why is this title a clue to whether or not he stays in prison? Guess we're going to have to read and find out. Some vocabulary that we're going to see in this read aloud is the word disguise, which is a noun, it's a thing, it's a costume that hides who you are. An example is the Spider-Man costume was an excellent disguise for Henry because we could not tell him apart from the other 10 Spider-Men at the school's Halloween party. Another word you'll see is distress. Distress is a noun. It means great difficulty, sadness, or pain. An example is the large family stranded on the busy highway next to their disabled car was in distress. Then we have the word dungeon, which is a noun. It's a place, an underground jail. The soldiers escorted the prisoner to the dark, damp dungeon. Then we have particularly, which is an adverb. That means it describes a verb, especially or very much. An example is Griffin, the family dog, was particularly fond of playing tug of war with an old chewed up bit of rope. Then we have the word pursued, which is a verb. It's something you do. Chased after or followed in order to capture. An example is the police pursued the bank robbers through the city. So what have we learned so far? What is a narrator? A narrator is the voice the author uses to tell the story. What is point of view? Point of view is the way the author chooses to have the narrator tell the story. Okay, and which point of view does the author of The Wind in the Willows have the narrator use? So the narrator is using third person. So third person, if you remember, means someone outside the story. First person means it's a character in the story telling the story, but third person means someone outside the story. So if someone's outside the story, they might know more than the characters that are in the story know. Sometimes our narrators that are third person are all-knowing. They know everything that's going on. Sometimes there's still like a mystery and things they don't know, but this is in third person point of view. We know that because it says he and they and she. If it was first person, it would say we and I and us, because it would include the character that's the narrator. So the themes we've heard so far in The Wind in the Willows are friendship, loyalty, hospitality, responsibility, and irresponsibility. Today you will hear more about the theme of irresponsibility. Would you consider Toad to be responsible or irresponsible based on his actions so far? Right? He's irresponsible, and we're going to see a lot more examples of him being irresponsible. I wonder if he will learn the error of his ways and change. We'll have to read to find out. In the previous read aloud, we know that Mr. Badger, Rat, and Mole showed responsibility when they tried to help Toad make better decisions, and Toad showed irresponsibility when he crashed the motor car and stole a motor car and ran away from home. So let's predict. The last sentence of the previous read aloud said, "Prisoner, it's going to be 20 years for you this time." Now that Toad has been sent to prison, what do you think will happen? Do you think being locked up will teach Toad to mend his irresponsible ways? Do you think Mr. Toad will serve his 20-year sentence? Listen carefully for the key words that signify the third-person point of view to hear if your predictions are correct. All right, let's get started. When Toad found himself in a dark dungeon, he flung himself on the floor and cried. "This is the end of everything," he said. "Imagine Toad imprisoned for stealing a motor car, and for lurid cheek. Stupid animal that I was!" He reproached himself with lamentations such as these. He passed his days refusing his meals. Now the jailer had a daughter who assisted her father. The jailer's daughter was particularly fond of animals. This kind-hearted girl said to her father one day, "Father, if you let me look after the toad, I'll make sure he eats." Her father replied that she could do what she liked with him. He was tired of Toad, so that day she knocked at the door of Toad's cell. "Now cheer up, Toad," she said, "and dry your eyes. Please do eat some dinner. See, I've brought you some of mine." It was Bubble and Squawk, and its fragrance reached the nose of Toad, but he stubbornly refused to eat. Bubble and Squawk is a traditional English dish made of leftover vegetables, in which the main ingredients are potato and cabbage. It is often eaten with a meat roast, and its name comes from the sound the food makes as it cooks. Instead, Toad wailed and would not be comforted, so the wise girl retired for the time. When the girl returned some hours later, she carried a tray with a cup of fragrant tea steaming on it, and a plate piled up with hot buttered toast. Toad sat up, dried his eyes, sipped his tea, and munched his toast. Before long, he began talking freely. The jailer's daughter saw that this social interaction was doing Toad as much good as the tea. "Tell me about Toad Hall," said the girl. "Toad Hall," said the Toad proudly, "is a gentleman's residence, dating from the 14th century. It is 5 minutes from church, the post office, and the golf course. Suitable for—" "Gracious," said the girl, laughing. "I don't want to buy it. Tell me something real about it. But first wait till I fetch you some more tea and toast." She skipped away and presently returned with a fresh tray full, and Toad, munching on another piece of buttered toast, told her all about Toad Hall. They had many interesting talks together after that, and the jailer's daughter grew very fond of Toad. One morning the girl spoke to Toad in an exceptionally thoughtful manner. "Toad," she said, "I need you to listen carefully. I have an aunt who is a washerwoman." What do you think a washerwoman is? What do you think they do? A washerwoman's job it is to wash laundry. "There, there," said Toad kindly. "Never mind. I have several aunts who ought to be washerwomen." "Do be quiet, Toad," said the girl. "As I said, I have an aunt who is a washerwoman, and she does the washing for all the prisoners. If you were to offer her some money, I believe she would let you have her dress and bonnet, and you could escape in disguise. You're very alike in many respects, particularly about the figure." In other words, the jailer's daughter thinks Toad looks like her washerwoman aunt. "We're not," said the Toad in a huff. "Toad, I'm trying to help you," explained the girl. "Yes, yes, I see. Thank you very much," said the Toad hurriedly. "But you wouldn't surely have Mr. Toad going about disguised as a washerwoman?" "I suppose you want to escape in a horse-drawn carriage," the girl retorted. Toad began to see the error of his ways. "You are a kind girl," he said. "Please introduce me to your aunt. I am sure we can come to a mutually agreeable arrangement." Next evening the girl ushered her aunt into Toad's cell. The sight of certain gold coins sealed the deal. In return for cash, Toad received a cotton print dress, an apron, a shawl, and a black bonnet. The only stipulation the old lady made was that she should be gagged and bound and placed in a corner of Toad's cell. This way she hoped to escape suspicion that she had helped Toad escape by making it look like she had been attacked. Toad was more than willing to oblige, and when the time came, he tied her up with great gusto. "Now it's your turn, Toad," said the girl. "Take off that coat and waistcoat of yours." So a waistcoat is a dressy vest. That's what Toad is wearing. Shaking with laughter, she helped him into the dress. "You're the very image of her," she giggled. "Now, good luck, Toad." With a quaking heart, Toad set forth cautiously. He was soon surprised to find that the washerwoman's squat figure, in its familiar cotton dress, opened every barred door, including the one that opened out onto the outside world. In other words, Toad's disguise worked, and everyone allows the washerwoman through. Toad immediately walked towards the nearest town. As he walked along, he spotted some red and green lights a little way off, and the sound of the puffing of engines. "Aha," he thought, "a railway station." He made his way to the station and found that a train, bound more or less in the direction of his home, was due to leave. "More luck," said Toad, as he went off to buy his ticket. He gave the name of the station that he knew to be nearest to Toad Hall, and mechanically reached into his waistcoat pocket for his money. But here the cotton gown thwarted his efforts. As a line began to form behind Toad, the Toad slowly began to realize that not only was there no waistcoat in the gown, but there was no money either. Forgetting his disguise, the Toad commanded the attention of the clerk. "I am Toad of Toad Hall. I've left my money behind," he offered. "Give me a ticket and I'll send the money on tomorrow." The clerk ignored Toad's request. "Stand away from the window, please, madam," the clerk ordered. Full of despair, he wandered blindly down the platform. What was to be done? As he pondered, he found himself opposite the engine which was being tended to by its driver. "Hello, madam," said the engine driver. "What's the trouble?" "Oh, sir," said Toad, crying afresh, "I am a poor washerwoman, and have lost my money and can't pay for a ticket." "That's a bad business indeed," said the engine driver. "Lost your money and can't get home, and got some kids, too, waiting for you, I dare say." "Any amount of them," sobbed Toad, "and they'd be hungry and playing with matches." Why do you think Toad is saying this? What is he trying to do? "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do," said the engine driver. "If you'll wash some shirts for me when you get home and send them along, I'll give you a ride on my engine." Toad agreed and scrambled up into the cab of the engine. Of course, he had never washed a shirt in his life. The guard waved his flag, the engine driver whistled, and the train moved out of the station. They had covered many a mile when Toad noticed that the engine driver was leaning over the side of the engine. Then he saw him climb onto the coals and gaze out over the top of the train. Then he returned and said to Toad, "It's very strange. We're the last train running in this direction tonight, yet I'm sure that I heard another following us." Toad became alarmed. By this time the moon was shining brightly, and the engine driver, steadying himself on the coal, could see more clearly the line behind them. Presently he called out, "I can see it now. There's an engine coming along at a great pace. It looks as if it were being pursued." The miserable Toad crouched in the coal dust. "The engine is crowded with policemen and the strangest lot of people, all shouting the same thing. Stop!" cried the engine driver. At that moment Toad fell on his knees and cried, "Save me, dear Mr. Engine Driver. I'm not a washerwoman. I'm the well-known Mr. Toad. I have just escaped from prison." The engine driver looked down upon him very sternly and said, "Now tell the truth. What were you put in prison for?" "It was nothing very much," said poor Toad. "I only borrowed a motor car." The engine driver looked very grave and said, "I fear that you must have been a wicked Toad, but you are evidently in distress, so I will not desert you." They piled on more coals. The engine leapt, but still their pursuers gained. The engine driver wiped his brow and said, "It's no good, Toad. They have the better engine. There's just one thing left. A short way ahead of us is a long tunnel, and on the other side of that, the line passes through a thick wood. I will put on all the speed I can while we're running through the tunnel. When we are through, I will put on the brakes. The moment it's safe to do so, you must jump and hide in the wood. Then I will go full speed ahead again. They piled on more coals, and the train shot into the tunnel and out at the other end. The wood lay dark and brooding upon either side of the line. The driver shut off the steam and put on the brakes. The toad got down on the step, and as the train slowed, he heard the driver call out, "Now jump!" Toad jumped, rolled down an embankment, and scrambled into the wood and hid. Peeping out, he saw his train get up speed again. Then out of the tunnel burst the pursuing engine. It didn't take long for the toad to realize that it was now very late and dark, and he was in an unknown wood. After so many weeks within walls, he found the wood strange and unfriendly. Toad walked until he could walk no further. At last, cold and tired, he sought the shelter of a hollow tree where he slept till morning. Wow, what an adventure for Toad. I wonder what's going to happen next. Were your predictions correct about whether Toad mends his irresponsible ways? Why or why not? When Toad is in the dungeon, what is his state of mind? In other words, how does he act that tells you about what he is thinking? Well, we hear that Toad is in distress, he cries and won't eat. He admits that he was stupid for stealing the motor car and for his impertinence to the police and the magistrate. So he's feeling sorry for what he's done. But does he stay that way? What is the first thing Toad does when he escapes? He goes to a railway station. And then what happens at the station? He wants to buy a ticket, but he realizes he doesn't have his money. And then he talks to the engine driver, pretending to be a washerwoman, and he lets them on the train. Another train pursues the train Toad is on. Who is on that train? That's right, the policeman from the jail yelling at the train to stop. How does Toad manage to escape the policeman this time? Well, he tells the train conductor who he actually is, and he gets help and ends up jumping off of the train into a wood. What theme is portrayed in today's Read Aloud? How is Toad irresponsible? If you were the jailer's daughter, would you have helped irresponsible Toad escape from the dungeon? Why or why not? Our word for today is pursued. In the story today, you heard that Toad was on a train being pursued by policemen on another train. Say the word pursued. Pursued means being chased after or followed in an attempt to be captured by someone or something. The squirrel was being pursued by the barking dog. Have you ever been pursued by anyone? Have you ever seen a person or an animal being pursued? So we've talked about point of view, right? And we've talked about how there's first person point of view and third person point of view. And it's how who the narrator is, if they're involved in the story and how they're telling the story. So when you look at the text that we have in front of us from our story today, you see that it says daughter, her, jailer's daughter, girl, her. And so we know that it says she. There's no I or we or us in there, so we know that it's third person point of view. All right, good job, guys. I'm excited to see what happens next week to Toad. Make sure to answer the questions and turn it in.